Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your daily source of Black news, views, and opinions. Today is Friday, April 1st. I'm Mimi Brown.
I'm your guy, Rodney Rakai.
I'm Demi Lobo. And on today's report, after many failed attempts to pass voting rights bills, Senate Democrats say they haven't given up. Black voters are holding their feet to the fire. Meanwhile, Black college students borrow more money and have more challenges paying student loans off compared to whites. Senator Elizabeth Warren says she's pushing the Biden administration to enact student loan forgiveness. But will she get it done? Then the House is expected to vote today on a bill legalizing marijuana on the federal level.
Plus, comedian Tony Roberts joins us today to take on Will Smith's drama in this week's topics with a side eye, and Snoop Dogg is trying to get Death Row Classics back on the label. Well, we'll tell you the latest in just a moment. We all have that and much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's get it.
Senate Democrats say they are still pushing to get a voting rights bill passed. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and other senators met with a number of African-American journalists yesterday. They spoke at length about issues important to the Black community. The Senate has failed to pass a voting rights bill this session. The president's promise to Black voters that the issue would be settled in the House and the Senate has been repeatedly shut down by Democratic senators Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin. They both sided with Republicans. This allowed the GOP to block bills that would have restored provisions from the Voting Rights Act that required states with a history of voting discrimination to obtain federal approval before making changes to their election process. I'm glad to hear that they're still working on this. I am a little disheartened that, it didn't pass this session. I really hope that, they're taking a look at what's going on with all the gerrymandering in all the different states and why they're going so hard to change, and we're seeing all the redistricting maps and things like that. And I really hope that they're looking at that, and because that's going to affect midterm elections.
Yeah, for sure.
It's absolutely going to affect the midterm elections. And, of course, the goal was initially to have all of this taken care of by November. That's what we wanted, to have everything taken care of by November. But what's also shocking to me is that voting rights is not just a Black issue. It's the tactics that are taken that affect the Black community. Everyone will be affected by this, Black, white, everyone who's disabled will all be affected by some of these tactics. But what I thought was very interesting about this meeting was Cory Booker. He says this is not a Joe Biden issue. It's definitely not just a caucus issue. This right now is about the numbers. And so back to what you're saying about the midterms coming up, a lot of Democrats are fearful that we're going to have a low turnout if Joe Biden does not do more to get voting rights at the top of the list right now.
I'm at a loss that we are still in negotiations for these kinds of things as a community. This is 2022. We have essentially eradicated HIV and AIDS from being traceable in people's bodies. We have electric vehicles, and yet we are still asking about voting rights in 2022. It is quite exhausting, and honestly, it's an embarrassment to this country that we refuse to make progress in areas that should have long ago been resolved.
Absolutely. And Mimi, you said yesterday about Ukraine also, too. That it makes you kind of like...
We can do things for Ukraine. We can send money to Ukraine. But to your point, Demi, this is not just a Black issue. But I think we're triggered, right? Because this has been our history for the past, 50, 60 years. And so while it will affect the disabled, it'll affect, older people with voting ID laws and things like that. We see this as a Black issue because it feels like, because it is what it is, they're trying to keep us from keeping our voices heard at the polls. Absolutely.
One other thing that has me triggered is student loan debt. Now, during that meeting with Black journalist Senator Elizabeth Warren, one of my favorite, she says that she's fighting to get the Biden administration to enact student loan forgiveness. Now, she says Black college students borrow more money and have more college debt to pay off versus white people. Warren also says 20 years after graduation that white people still owed about 6% of what Black people borrowed. Now, Black people, we owe 95% of what they borrowed 20 years later. I absolutely love me some Senator Elizabeth Warren. I love her so much. She is so vocal. She is so real. I don't know what it is that she just wants to make sure that the Black people feel her presence, but we love you, Senator Elizabeth Warren. And you know what? We need someone like that. We need a person, a white face, dare I say, that's going to continue to keep pushing the same message over and over and over until our voice is heard.
Yeah, what these universities are doing is essentially price gouging. They are drastically overstating what the value of their education is worth. And while I appreciated my experience in college, the fact of the matter is this is predatory, what we are doing to young students. America is quite literally eating its young and forcing them to go deeper into the hole in order to find a way out of it.
You're absolutely right. But what I don't understand is why President Biden just doesn't sign an executive order and make a lot of this go away. We saw Trump sign executive order after executive order, and he didn't care who got mad or why they were mad. He just signed it. So Biden campaigned on for student loan forgiveness, at least 10,000. And here we are, closer to the midterm elections again, and he still has not fulfilled that promise.
I mean, he has tried a little bit with certain people have gotten student loan forgiveness.
The predatory lending and some of those. But the overall, group of people who would need their loans forgiven still haven't felt, that extra change in their pocket yet.
Right. And over at Texas A&M, Ukrainian students are now being given free college education as well. So there are things that people can do if they feel empowered. When Ketanji Brown Jackson was nominated for the U.S. Court of Appeals last year, Senator Lindsey Graham was among 3 Republicans who voted to put her on the bench. Now, Lindsey Graham says he can't vote for her because Jackson has a record of judicial activism. Graham says he had a problem with her sentencing methods on child pornography cases. A number of other Republicans have argued during the Senate vetting process that Jackson is weak on crime. Senator Susan Collins announced yesterday that she will vote for Jackson. So far, she's the only GOP senator to do so.
While Senator Graham refuses to vote for Judge Jackson, an anti-sexual violence group is supporting her. The Ultraviolet Action Group joined the Black Women's Leadership Collective and other groups throwing their support behind the judge. The coalition spokesperson says survivors of sexual violence deserve to have someone like Jackson on the high court.
Nancy Pelosi continues to call for a code of ethics for Supreme Court justices. This comes after revelations that Justice Clarence Thomas's wife, Jeannie, tried to help President Trump overturn the 2020 election. Pelosi and other Democrats want Justice Thomas to recuse himself from any future election cases that may come to the court. The House Speaker refuses to say if Thomas should resign or be impeached. She says Thomas should have never been appointed to the court at the first time.
The House today passed a federal bill legalizing marijuana. The Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, to be exact, passed on party lines 220 to 204, with 10 Republicans joining Democrats to approve the bill. The law gets rid of many criminal penalties involving marijuana. A process would also be put in place to expunge previous marijuana-related convictions from criminal records. A Pew Research study says 91% of Americans think that marijuana should be legal. The bill now moves to the Senate floor, where we'll find strong opposition from those who probably smoked it in college.
2 WNBA players are breaking their silence about Brittney Griner's imprisonment in Russia. Most WNBA players have been hesitant to talk about Griner's detention to avoid hurting her case, but Angel McCautry and Breonna Stewart say players have been having discussions recently about how to help Greiner, who's been locked up since February. The women say they realize it could have easily been one of them instead of Greiner, as many WNBA players go overseas to play in countries like Russia for more money. Greiner was detained at the Moscow airport after police say they found vape cartridges and allegedly contained cannabis oil in her luggage. U.S. officials say they are continuing to work with Russia to get Greiner released.
Senate GOP leaders are refusing to revive a program that allows public schools to serve free meals to students during the summer. But Senators Debbie Stabenow and Lisa Murkowski introduced a bipartisan bill yesterday that would extend the program for another year. Stabenow, who is a Democrat, says Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell told her no when she asked him to bring the program back. Now, Stabenow says up to 30 million kids could go hungry this summer. The program is scheduled to end June 30th. It allowed kids to eat free meals last year at a time where millions of adults were unemployed because of COVID shutdowns.
Meanwhile, the Senate is close to making a deal on a COVID aid package, but this deal is $5 billion less than the plan that failed to make it out of Congress last month. The bill was slashed to $10 billion. Now, President Biden is pushing to get legislation on his desk that will pay for free home COVID tests, free vaccinations, and free masks to the American people. The bill may have a hard time getting some Democrats on board after the global vaccination program was pulled out of the bill.
And from the White House to Congress, Democrats are working on ways to lower gas prices. Yesterday, the president said he would release 1 billion barrels of oil from the emergency reserves. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi also saying Congress will do what it can, but she doesn't like the idea of suspending the gas tax. That tax is 18 cents per gallon.
The main question had been, do you support a gas tax holiday? And that is immediate, and it has appeal. People understand it. There's going to be a reduction in the gas tax. That's the pro. The con is that the oil companies do not necessarily pass that on to the consumer.
The speaker says suspending the gas tax would also take away from the Highway Trust Fund, which pays for roads and mass transit.
Slightly more Americans are saying they are satisfied with the way things are going here in the United States. A new Gallup poll says that 24% of people polled have a positive view about how the direction of the country is going. Now, that's up from 21% in the February poll. Only 46% of Democrats said things are going well. Analysts say the rapidly declining numbers of daily COVID-19 deaths and infections may have helped improve those poll numbers. But economic concerns with high gas prices as well as inflation kept the dissatisfaction numbers in the poll at 75%.
All right. On the campaign trail in Mar-a-Lago, former President Donald Trump fundraising for Michigan Republican congressional candidate John Gibbs. But it was his comments during the Mar-a-Lago event that seemed to get the attention of the crowd. Someone shouted out "gays for Trump," and that's when Trump told someone in the crowd, quote, "You don't look gay." Now, the crowd laughed at the former president's remarks. His comments come on the same week that Florida's GOP Governor Ron DeSantis signed the controversial bill, Don't Say Gay, into law, blocking classroom instruction about sexual orientation and gender identity.
And lawmakers are taking steps to bring the cost of insulin down for some patients. The House passed a bill capping the monthly cost at $34 for insured patients. The bill is part of an election year push by Democrats for price curbs on prescription drugs at a time of rising inflation. Experts say the legislation would provide significant relief for privately insured patients with basic plans. It will also help Medicare enrollees facing rising out-of-cost pockets for their insulin. But some say could save hundreds of dollars annually. However, the bill would not help the uninsured.
The U.S. ambassador to the United States is scheduled to travel to Moldova and Romania on tomorrow. Linda Thomas Greenfield will use the trip to learn about how both countries are handling Ukrainian refugees. Ambassador Greenfield will also meet with those refugees as well as representatives of non-government organizations. Almost 4 million people have fled Ukraine since the Russian invasion began.
Wow. A former Louisiana state police officer involved in the beating and tasing death of Ronald Greene can be heard on a body cam saying he beat the ever-living F out of Greene. Audio obtained by the Associated Press shows investigators were suspect of Chris Hollingsworth's version of what happened on the evening in September 2020. This is audio from the interrogation.
According to this video, at least according to us, it doesn't appear that you ever gave him a chance to get out of the car. I mean, you pretty much run up to the window and within a second or two, you tase him. How come?
I was in fear that he was going to hurt myself or Trooper DeMoss.
Greene was beaten and tased to death by troopers after a high-speed chase in 2020. Officials told Greene's family he died after a car crash, but body cam evidence proved that was not true. And it feels as if we can have one of these conversations every single day at this point. We just talked about this yesterday, and it's an ongoing problem. As I stated yesterday, I have a 14-year-old son and a 16-year-old nephew who live with me full-time. They are on the cusp of getting their driver's permits and licenses, and I am deathly afraid of what can happen when they are pulled over by police officers.
You know, they were lied to for 2 years about what happened to their loved one. And, you know, I really wonder about this because I am so infuriated every time, like you said, Rodney, we hear a story like this. But this is one of those stories that live rent-free in my mind. And I really wonder what it's like to not be black and have to watch this and see what black people are going through over and over again. There was a white lady on Instagram that said, you know, I've been a white lady my entire life and I really feel so bad for what black people are going through. But I don't really think that non-black people really could understand the fear that comes with literally just getting pulled over by a police officer. I really don't know if white people really understand what that fear comes with.
No, Demi, you're right. And speaking of fear, the officer that we just heard in that audio said that he was afraid. He feared Ronald Greene. I think that, you know, if if you're in that line of work, and I assume that it is very, hard work, because you just never know what you're going to get. But what happened here was not out of fear. That was out of hate. And they lied to his family. They lied to them, like you said, for 2 years. I mean, this man was pulled over. I believe this was a traffic stop as well. He was pulled over, and they literally lied. They beat him and then lied about it. They said he got in a car accident.
Additionally, Ronald Greene was on audio saying that, I'm your brother.
Yes.
Once again, trying to appeal to white people for humanity, for his life to be respected and spared. I hate that for him.
Absolutely. 6 months after settling a racial discrimination suit with the Department of Justice, a Utah school district is dealing with another racial incident. The new suit alleges a black student was slapped by another in front of a teacher at Davis, Utah Middle School. The incident, which happened back in December, reportedly happened at a school assembly. Witnesses say the teacher did nothing after watching the incident. Instead, the instructor gave the black student an unsatisfactory grade for conduct during the assembly.
And a federal judge in Florida threw out several of the state's new GOP-backed voting restrictions. Judge Mark Walker says that those rules violated minority voters' constitutional rights. He blocked the state from enforcing provisions aimed at reducing the use of ballot drop boxes. He also stopped state officials from making it more difficult for third-party groups to collect voter registration forms. Voting rights activists applauded the judge's actions at stopping what they call the GOP's use of voter suppression methods.
Never stops. In New York, a state court judge is striking down the Democratic-drawn congressional maps. Now, a state Supreme Court judge, Patrick McAllister, says the map defies a voter-backed constitutional amendment aimed at ending partisan gerrymandering. He ordered New York legislators to redraw the maps by April 11th, and if they don't, the judge says he will appoint an independent group to come up with a brand new map.